You are listening to GeekFest Rants on the IC Robots Radio Network.
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man! It's game over!
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all! So say we all!
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got the best for so much less. You really flip your lid. From bikes to trains to video games, it's the biggest toy store there is.
Gee whiz!
I don't want to grow up, 'cause baby, if I did, I couldn't be a Toys R Us kid. More games, more toys. Oh boy, I want to be a Toys R Us kid.
Hi everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and today we are going to look at the state of collecting. The landscape keeps changing in terms of how we individually do our collecting and where do we buy things, how do we find them, and that sort of thing. And today Steve Folks will be joining me once again, and we're going to kind of compare and contrast our different methods of collecting, since we kind of both started at two different times in terms of our age and, what period of time we were starting collecting at. Mine goes back a little further than his, but if there's one thing that we do have in common is the direction where all this is heading, because we're in a completely different world now in terms of where to buy things, and we are going to try to theorize on where things could be going. So let's get started with the state of collecting.
You can collect them all!
You are a toy!
Batteries not included.
Just get those wonderful toys.
Details on specially marked packages at participating stores.
Is that the $6 million man's boss?
It's Oscar Goldman.
Why do you have that?
That's worth a lot of money. That's much more valuable than Steve Austin.
Action figures each sold separately.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end.
Some assembly required.
All your favorite Star Wars heroes and villains. I have 3 of each. 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
All right, everybody, once again, I have Steve here joining me. Hi, Steve, how are you?
Hey, Carlos. Hey, everyone. How are you doing?
Good. Today, we are going to be hitting toy collecting, or collecting in general, any kind of genre material that we're into collecting, and we're going to try to look at the state of collecting and how it stands right now. As far as I can tell, things have been changing so much very recently with certain major toy retailers going under. But, depending on how old you are, you will have seen the whole toy market change so many times. Like, for example, when I was a teenager, let's say, when I was getting, my Star Wars fix, let's say from the age of 10 onward, this is 1980 I'm talking about. This is back when I lived in New York City, in Queens. And in Jackson Heights, I might have mentioned this once before. First of all, I had no access to chain toy stores. Places like Toys R Us were either too far away from me. If I couldn't walk to them, I couldn't go, basically. So, I wasn't about to take the subway or the train or a bus to go to a toy store, a 10-year-old kid. Even back then, I don't think it was safe anyway. But the closest I could get to a toy store was a place called Toy City. And it was a large, brick and mortar store that specialized in mainly toys, but they also had RPG supplies, models, trains, sporting equipment. It kind of did everything under one roof. And it was, I imagine, kind of like a mom and pop shop. It wasn't a chain. So that was the place to go. And for a pretty long time, that was the only place I could find stuff, because I don't remember having very small toy stores anywhere. It was just that one big one. And not until I started going to conventions did I now get exposed to the dealer room. And all of a sudden it's whoa, wait a minute. Now there's stuff that is specifically, super specifically what I'm looking for. So I could kind of bounce back and forth between those two sources. Now, what about you? What was your first access to toys, let's say?
Well, I think my first access to toys was Christmas Day, right? So,
okay. Well, yeah, there you go.
But I'm not going to include anything, too early, because that wasn't really, intentionally me going out and finding stuff. That was stuff that fell into my lap. So I'll go a bit past that. My first real, when I first kind of opened my eyes to, collecting and going out of my way to find things was here. And you were in Jersey, so I'm not sure if you ran into this, but, we have a lot of malls here.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of times on like Saturdays and Sundays, they'd be like collectors who would come and put out tables all inside the mall. And they would sell, like sports stuff or comic books and action figures. And so this happened maybe like 3 times a year or so. And it was nothing I planned for, but my mother and I would always go to the malls. So we used to always stumble upon these, we used to always stumble on these events. And so I started, getting the schedule when they would, come about. And they always have, like Star Wars action figures I would love. And so I remember getting like an original C-3PO, R2-D2, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. They were in pretty bad shape. They were like, I remember the C-3PO had like teeth marks. It looked like a dog had chewed it. but that was my first real entry into wanting to sort of like complete a set of something or go on my way to find something,
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I was also lucky enough to have a Toys R Us maybe, 2 minutes from my house. So, yeah. I was in a very good area for sort of collecting. I was surrounded by malls and surrounded by bigger chain stores. So, but like, as we're sort of going to be hinting toward, all that is sort of kind of changing now, where the big box stores, like, well, at least, one of our major retailers for toys, doesn't really exist here anymore. And as well as I think malls in general, like what I was describing earlier, the vendors that would come and set up, that doesn't even happen anymore.
Really?
I'm not sure if the mall sort of say, no, you guys aren't allowed here anymore, or maybe there wasn't enough, some sort of contract fell through or something, but that's gone. And, Toys R Us is no longer with us. So, yeah, but that's how I got started, at least.
Well, I do remember, when I eventually moved to Jersey, yes, that sometimes when we would visit a mall, and yeah, they would have, but I mainly remember like sports memorabilia, sports cards, that kind of thing, where they would set up a big square, let's say, and you would just walk up and down the aisles, and all of a sudden you can go around that stuff. But I like to mention something else. And again, once we deal with the internet, that's a monster. That exploded everything. Once you throw eBay in the mix, forget it. Everything goes out the window, and Amazon and stuff like that. But even before we even reached that time, which I imagine would be like the late 90s, because really when the internet, as far as I can remember, when it really got hot and heavy was the late 90s. But before that, still in the 80s, while I was talking about earlier, there was a couple of other sources that were a little dicey. One of them was, I was a big collector of Starlog magazine. And in the back of Starlog magazine, in the classifieds, you would have classified places. You would have addresses of places all over the country. And some of them were actually stores within, from Starlog itself. They would have their own magazine selling thing or poster selling thing. So I remember I would order stuff directly, from Starlog sometimes, and sometimes I would find other people that were selling stuff. And I remember you would send them like a check for $1, and they would send you a catalog, and then you would take that catalog and thumb through the catalog and then order directly from them. But it was so primitive back then. It was, I know it's ridiculous because that's probably how it was done for the previous 50 years. But yeah, you would mail it in and they would send it to you, and then you would start a relationship, if you will, a purchasing relationship with that individual. And some of those places, because it was New York, and especially New York City, the addresses would be there so you can go visit their store. And, I remember, I believe that's how I found there was a poster place somewhere in Manhattan, this little rinky little area where you had to kind of go down the steps almost into a basement to get into the poster store. And that's where I got my Raiders of the Lost Ark poster and my Star Wars. I think it was like the re-release that had the Revenge of the Jedi banner in the bottom, my RoboCop poster, my Predator poster, all those 80s posters. I remember, I'm pretty sure it came through one of those classified ads. Now, even before, like I said, the internet, I wasn't involved because I never was in the internet that early. I didn't jump on the internet probably till 1996, I would say, because that's when I started working at a company that gave everybody internet access at the company, and it was insane. But I do remember a friend of mine who would always tell me that even in the early 90s, there were these, I think he called them Usernet groups, like internet, like that. Where Usenet. You could Usenet, that's it, and you can kind of connect with people, and they would sell stuff. They would have stuff for sale, and that's how you would make those connections. I don't think you could even look at pictures of anything. I think it was almost like a gigantic text mail system where you would just chat and exchange, information. But I never jumped on that. But I do remember some people telling me that was another method of getting stuff, again, before the internet. Now, again, because you're younger than me, did you start right off the bat with the internet being available as a source of other places to shop? Yeah, it had to have been, because from when I started, not even seriously collecting though, but when I just started, shopping around for toys or action figures or comic books, all the stuff that I was trying to get would be in the bigger stores like the Toys R Us or my local comic book store. So when we first got the internet, we got it vaguely. I quote unquote know early. We got America Online around. Oh yeah, We got America Online around. I want to say 94, 95. That's pretty early. That's pretty good. Pretty early, yeah. And I remember we got the little floppy disks we had to put in. Yeah. But that when we had it, I was a kid, so we weren't definitely doing any shopping. We were basically just we would go into like a kids chat room or something. So, but as I got older, later on, the internet definitely became something where it would be the biggest alternative to finding things I was looking for. When I was younger, rather, most of it was just through comic book shops. I had two near me, so a lot of it was still, I could actually go to a physical place and look around for things rather than, and like you were saying about, using it and everything. Yeah, that was all like text-based. There was no real, it looked very, very different than how we picture, the internet, looking now. Yeah, I know. And even, I'm trying to remember as far as like Toys R Us goes, once those initial stores that I was talking about earlier closed down and disappeared, again, my main source was conventions. I did a lot of conventions in the 80s, and it was great because it was so specific as to exactly what I was looking for. Whatever crazy thing I was into, Star Wars, Star Trek, Babylon 5, you name it, that was the place where stuff would appear, and it's like, oh my God, I never knew this existed, and that kind of stuff. I would say I probably didn't jump onto a Toys R Us kind of store. Let me just think for a minute. I probably was still living in New York, in Queens, and there were a couple of Toys R Us's that popped up around there, and I started going to those. But I remember at the same time as that's happening, people would always talk about Walmart. Hey, Walmart has this, and Walmart has that, and Walmart has this. But in the area that I lived, even up to the point where I moved to Jersey, in this northern part of Jersey, there were still no Walmarts close by. Most of the Walmarts were slightly, South Jersey, Central Jersey, but they haven't really made it all the way to the north part of Walmart until... I think that's definitely changed. Yeah, no. And right around, I think maybe a couple of years before I left Jersey, that's when they started popping up all over the place. They were swarming on the north side of Jersey. But I was completely cut off from Walmart for a long time, and I couldn't understand. I had a Kmart, and I'm like, well, what's a Walmart? It's like a Kmart, but it's a lot bigger and has more stuff. Is that what a Walmart is? And yeah, that's basically what it was. I did have, like I said, a Kmart, so I had I got used to the idea of an everything store that had a little toy section to it, so I kind of understood the concept. Same thing with Target. It's a big store that has everything, but they have the little toy section. But even while, let's say, I was in college, so I'm talking about late 80s into the early 90s, Toys R Us was probably my main source. And that would be followed by KB, which I'm sure you're familiar with KB. Because those were in every single mall.
Every mall, yeah, and that's right. And I slipped my mind as well. KB's, was definitely a big player because, again, we hang out, be in the mall so much. KB's Toys was huge, actually. In fact, I would say, actually, KB Toys was actually probably more influential in my collecting than Toys R Us was, only because, it was in malls so much, and they were really in every mall. So they had, like, not cheaper prices necessarily, but they had sort of a different selection necessarily than what Toys R Us I remember having, because Toys R Us had like more like the big pieces, like kind of like the more general stuff that most people would buy. KB's, for whatever reason, it had the same type of things, but slightly other products that you might be harder to find, especially when you compare it to like Target or Walmart, where those type of stores, they have a very limited selection to what they actually carry. Because, you're getting a small little chunk of a toy area, as opposed to KB's, which would specialize and focus on toys.
Yeah, KB was kind of weird because, first of all, like you said, because they were in the mall, I had so much access because, like, every day at work or wherever I was, whether in school or work, you go to the mall for lunch and there's KB. So you it's part of your daily routine of checking those aisles to see what they had. And the thing about KB I remember the most was the McFarlane Movie Maniacs, because I used to collect those like crazy. And that was the thing about KB, is that they did have sections of very specialized lines that were not that widely distributed in a bigger store like a Toys R Us. All of a sudden you find like, oh my God, these, and even some exclusives, I think. At that point we were still dealing with certain stores having exclusives only at a certain store. So there was a special aspect to KB. Now, granted, with KB, I don't remember seeing like an entire wall of like Star Wars figures or Star Wars section. Everything would be a lot more compact, but it seemed like there was more of a selection, even though it was more compact.
Yeah, no, I got that feeling as well. And another thing about with KB's is I noticed, I'm not sure, let me know if you found the same thing. From KB to KB's, they had different, like one KB's felt like it had a certain type of selection. And if you go to another KB's, it felt like it would have the same things, obviously, but it felt like it would be more varied from KB to KB, if that makes any sense. And as opposed to if you go to Toys R Us, where if you go to one Toys R Us, you're going to generally see the same exact line.
Yeah, they're more uniform,
it's more uniform. But it seemed like, I'm not sure why, but it seemed like with KB's, each store had more like maybe a specific handle to what they actually ordered, or if they can order maybe a certain amount of one thing. It just felt like each store had a more of a variation between the two, as opposed to like two different Toys R Us's.
The worst thing I think would be around Christmas time, where the malls would dedicate a store to, for example, a KB outlet. So it wasn't like KB quality, top-notch material, but like the leftovers from the previous year. And same thing with Toys R Us. They would have a Christmas store in a mall, out of all places, but it would be like junky stuff. It was like, what's this? This is not the real stuff. It's like, what's going on here? But yeah, that was, again, that, and again, around that time, I would say, is when the internet just exploded, and eBay, I would say, would be the first thing, because eBay was just a monster, and it's still a monster. I still get a lot of stuff from eBay, left and right. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, because I kind of stopped going to conventions with the frequency that I was going in the past, eBay became the place where you just think of something and you just type it up and there it is. Some wacko somewhere has it for sale and you're looking for it. It's incredible. And Amazon, similarly too, obviously it's a little more expensive because you're not really bidding for something, but the selection is just incredible what's out there. And I would say now that Toys R Us is KB's been gone for a while now.
I was going to say, I think KB's was like the first casualty. Yeah. It was, and when eBay and Amazon, they fired their opening shots.
Yeah.
I think KB's was the first to fall.
Yeah, KB was one of the first. I remember there was another toy store called Toy World or Child's World. And I remember seeing commercials, but I don't remember if it was a franchise. Maybe it was just a gigantic mom and pop store that could afford commercials. But I do remember Child World being advertised on TV for some reason. But I never had a chance to go to that one. But yeah, once KB went down, and now that Toys R Us went down, all that's left really, if you want to go to a store, your top tier places, I would say, would be Walmart and Target. That's the only place you can find toys, an area in the store with toys. But then you have your second tier, like your GameStops, your FYI or FYE, where they sell video games and records, CDs. Actually, they do sell records now. They do sell records, and stuff like that. But I can you think of any other conceivable place? Like, I remember Suncoast Video. I used to go to Suncoast Video, and they used to have a toy section amongst all the videos. But I think Suncoast also went under too.
Yeah, Suncoast is long gone. But that's another great one. Where I remember I got about '97 when the Star Wars re-releases were coming out. Suncoast had a huge selection of Star Wars figures, and I want to say it was still Kenner at the time that did them.
Well, yeah, when Star Wars switched from Kenner to, there was a period where it was both. It was Kenner Hasbro, and then Hasbro fully took over, and they completely faded Kenner out of the picture.
Yeah, Kenner out, yeah. Because I think at that time, I still remember the Kenner branding on them.
Yes.
But there was a bunch of Star Wars figures in Suncoast. And that was another place where, again, I would go back to and find, different, little small, figures and everything. And they had a very specific, very, very specific, toy section. Obviously, it was focused on movies.
Yeah.
Suncoast was, all movies. The only other really one I can think of is FAO Schwartz, but that
was like a high scale, very expensive.
Yeah, that was more upscale. Yeah, that was like a connoisseur of toys. If you were collecting that. But yeah, besides that, there was nothing really right now besides that.
No, I mean, not really. I mean, again, if you want to see a dealer room, you can still see it if you go to a convention. If you go to your Comic-Cons or whatever, you're going to have that gigantic dealer room. So it's a good experience to be able to see product right there in front of you. Granted, you're going to most likely be paying through the roof because it's it's convention prices, but. Yeah, I mean, other than Walmart and Target, you're really, it's a little more difficult now. And the thing is also that, even at the height of popularity for these kind of stores, whether it's Toys R Us or KB, there were always distribution problems. Especially Hasbro. I mean, I've been reading about distribution problems for decades now. And, people would always complain, and they were a lot of times were right. A certain wave of action figures would come out and the store wouldn't have it. Or they would only have so little that by the time you get there, everything's sold out. And the people that are buying would be very upset. And then you would have to resort to going to eBay and paying even more for it. And even up to this point, they're still having issues with distribution. Now, granted, by not having a Toys R Us around, I imagine that has to be hurting all these manufacturers. Hasbro, for example, I don't know what percentage of their sales would come out of something like a Toys R Us. I would imagine a big, gigantic chunk of that would come from there. And I can't tell you that all of a sudden, is Walmart picking up the slack, or is Target picking up that slack? I don't think so. I think they're still ordering what they normally would have ordered, and now the rest of that stuff, it goes out the window.
Yeah, I have noticed that actually the Target near me, they have expanded their I noticed that their Lego section and their dedicated action figure, kind of like generic action figure section has increased post Toys R Us. So I think some stores are trying to pick up the slack, but I think that's probably more towards the bigger stores, like the super Walmarts and those super chains.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would even make up the percentage that was probably lost by especially for Hasbro. And I noticed also Barnes & Noble.
Oh, yeah.
They have a much bigger toy Lego section now, but again, it'd be, you can't really compare the two from what they probably would have done for a dedicated store like Toys R Us. But you spoke on the distribution issue, the problem with that, and yeah, I think that's one of the things that sort of, I won't say led to the demise of Toys R Us, but it definitely had to play a factor, because the idea of going out and like peg hunting, going to like, on Saturday morning, Sunday morning, going out to like, a list of different, department stores to find, one item.
Yeah.
That way of thinking, especially when now we have, online ordering, it seems almost silly to think of, you doing that when you can just pop on your computer and type it in and, have them come to you.
Well, especially when you have a service like Amazon, and if you have Amazon Prime, or if you order, above a certain amount of merchandise where you get free shipping, that shipping is something very important, because if you can save the money on shipping, there's no point in going to a store, because you're not going to save any money by, wasting gas to drive somewhere just to be disappointed.
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, and I think that there's something to be said. Maybe a lot of people still get that thrill of, going to store to store and, searching through the pegs and everything. Because I have spoken to a few people who said the reason why they don't embrace online shopping or online toy hunting rather is because they like the idea of going out and kind of like, the hunt of basically of trying to find it. And I guess for certain people that is sort of that's half the fun of it, of when you finally have it, in your hands, you finally find it. But I guess that percentage of people wasn't enough to save, to save Toys R Us. So
no, and what I was going to say is that the last time I remember something like that usually has to do with Star Wars, when they do these, movies about to come out, and like a month or two before they have the Force Friday or whatever title they give it, where they do put, at midnight. The Midnight Madness, where they put up all the line of the toys that midnight, and people are lining up outside the store. And they still have been doing that a little bit. I remember with Force Awakens they did it. I think they did it with The Last Jedi. I'm not sure. The Rogue One they did it. Solo was a little bit softer in terms of, I don't know if they went all the way to midnight, but they have already announced for Episode 9 they are going to have one of these midnight things where they're going to unleash all the merchandise. And that is one of the few occasions I remember where you could actually go to the store. Granted, back then I was still going to Toys R Us, because Toys R Us was more organized, and they could do that. They could have people waiting outside. They would give away free posters, and they would have some kind of freebies to give people that were waiting. And then they open the doors, everybody rushes in like a maniac. With Walmart, they don't take it that serious. With Walmart, since especially the ones I'm around here, they're open 24 hours. So it's like, yeah, whatever. The stuff's there or it's not there. If it's not there today, it'll be there tomorrow. You're like, dude, what's going on? Where's the stuff? And they look at you like you have three heads. But yeah, Toys R Us, because it was a toy store, they understood these promotions, and they were a little more, observant of them. I honestly doubt we're going to get that anymore from something like a Walmart. I don't think they would take it that serious. I think they would just be like, hey, the stuff's on the pegs when the stuff's on the pegs. When our stoner stock boy in the back gets back from his break, you'll wait, and that's when the stuff is going to go up there. And you're like, okay, it's like 1 a.m. You're like, I got to get to bed. I got to get out of here. So I'm not holding my breath for Episode 9 figures, in that fashion anymore.
Yeah, I remember I used to collect the Matchbox and Hot Wheels cars. And so when a new wave would come out, I remember being in a Walmart and asking, did you guys get new settings? They would come in like the boxes, labeled. It would have the label on it, Mattel, for Hot Wheels and Matchbox. And so I was looking around for them, to see if they put any new ones out. And so I asked, the lady, when are you going to put? When is the new release of the Matchbox line? And she shook to me. She's like, we got a new shipment Saturday morning, whenever we put them out. Oh, okay, all right, great. So, you got to wait around till some guy, takes the box cutter and opens up the box.
I remember when Solo came out, and I went to Target, and I think they were purposely loading the pegs slowly. They didn't want to put everything out there because they didn't want scalpers to come and just take everything and run. So they were putting things in waves. So I'm there and I'm looking at the pegs, and there's like practically nothing I want. So I go to the guy, hey, when there's supposed to be other things up for sale today. Where are they? I don't see them. He's like, okay, hold on, let me go in the back. So the guy goes in the back. I was convinced he wasn't going to come back, and he comes back with a cart full of boxes, and I'm like, oh crap. So I'm like looking around. It's like, I hope nobody, I hope that this poor guy doesn't get in trouble, because I asked him to bring out something and he came back with everything. So he starts opening boxes, and I'm like, I'll take that, I'll take this, I'll take that, I'll take this. And I walked out, not with a lot of stuff, but it's like, I felt bad. I'm like, wow, this guy opened everything for me. This never happened before. And little by little, they started restocking the pegs. And I guess that's the closest. I mean, again, Target is a little more upscale than Walmart. No kidding. And I doubt I'm going to get that kind of service at a Walmart. That's for sure.
Definitely not. And I think that even that mentality of like you said earlier of having like a dedicated store. Now I don't want to keep saying toys because it could be anything that you're collecting, but having that sort of dedicated store to it is, I think, going to be disappearing very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a friend of mine when he was very, very young, he got a job at Toys R Us just so he could have the pick of the litter, just so he could be the one that's in the back room. And even I remember years after he had already left, he was already in college, and we would go to Toys R Us, and he would be like, I'll be right back. I'm going to the back. I'm like, what are you doing? Don't go to the back. I'm going to the back. So he would just walk in the back like he owned the place. And sometimes he would come out with nothing, and sometimes he would come out with something. And it was like, oh my God, we're gonna get arrested here, and it's gonna be like, well, what are you in for? Oh, murder. What are you in for? Arson. What are you in for? We went to the back room to look for toys. Try to explain that to your lawyer. Oh man, but now let's look at what can possibly happen for the future. Now I know from these different websites that I go to and these different groups that I belong to, something that they've been dabbling in, a lot of companies. I even heard McFarlane is trying to do another push of action figures, for their movie Maniacs or some other lines that they do. They do a lot of sports stuff too, where they want to be able to market directly to the individual instead, by bypassing the stores that basically don't exist anymore and any gigantic retailers, because they probably think they can make some better money, going straight to that individual. The problem with that is that, again, a Toys R Us will buy, 50,000 units of something, but if an individual will buy one, so you got to get 50,000 individuals to equal what a Toys R Us would be normally buying. I don't know if that math works, but it's not the first time I've heard of this, method of going straight to that individual. And it's happening right now. For example, with Hasbro, they just introduced, there's always been a Hasbro store online, but now it's even more exclusive, where you have all these rules where you pay a fee. I think it's called Hasbro Pulse or something. I forget the name of it. And you pay like a yearly fee, and that gives you access to their store. It doesn't get you anything substantial. It's exclusive access to buy stuff. It's like a VIP club, if you will, of access, which is like, ooh, I don't know if I like the sound of that.
Right. And I can see that. I can see the reasoning behind that, because the toy company NECA, I think they were toying around, no pun intended. I think they were toying around with the same sort of idea where, because, as of right now, you can't, like, if you go to the NECA website, they'll display their products, but they always distribute it, to big vendors.
Yeah.
So, but I think they're playing around with the idea of having some sort of exclusive access where you can pay like a membership fee, like a subscription, basically, and then you can get access to their, and maybe for like a cheaper discount rate, maybe like a few bucks off or something, you can get access to their figures directly instead of going through a.
That idea has been circulating, I guess, amongst a lot of companies, because they're thinking, well, maybe we can squeeze a little more money out of that. The other thing that I've also noticed, again, some people love it, some people don't care, they'll spend whatever, but some people are very upset that Hasbro did, I don't know if you've been following the story of the sail barge, the gigantic Return of the Jedi sail barge that is just being delivered to people now. This thing is the size of like a table. And the way that they promoted it was that they took online orders in advance, and only if, I believe, they could pre-sell 10,000 of these things were they going to manufacture 10,000 of them. So in other words, if they had 7,000, everybody would get a refund and nobody gets anything. But obviously they did get enough, so now everybody's getting it. It's like a $500 item we're talking about here. But the idea of crowdfunding a mass-produced item, and if you don't guilt people enough into, well, you guys better buy this or else nobody's getting it. It's like, oh, okay, I'll buy it. Now, granted, the item is beautiful, it's gorgeous, but the concept of now, a multi-billion-dollar company coming to you and saying, we need the money up front and we're not going to give you the item for another 6 months if enough people buy it. Are you in? It's like, yikes. I mean, like, this isn't a mom and pop store. This is freaking Hasbro. These guys are huge. This is the biggest, one of the Mattel, Hasbro, these big companies. I don't know if you've experienced this yet, on some of your collecting.
I have experienced crowdfunding, but I'll get to that in a second. To go back to the sale barge thing is where, for something like that, for something so huge and massive, and I can actually see, the reasoning behind, crowdfunding something that on that scale. Now, if we're talking about, if they want to do like a 6-inch line of, regular figures, and they're trying to crowdfund that, that's a little ridiculous. I can see, why that would, create a problem here. But for like a specialty item like that, like something so big, and they're not going to sell 80,000 units of that thing. They're going to there's going to be a much smaller run. So I can see them saying, okay, we would love to make this thing, we love to get it out, but we have to sort of make sure we're not eating the cost of it as well. So for a big item, I can justify. I can see, okay, that's something I can see them doing. But for if it was like a smaller item, like my story is about to be about, then yeah, that's probably something I was taking it easy on.
But let me ask you a question. Now that this $500 item succeeded of getting enough people to buy it and they are going to produce it, what are the odds that they're going to probably do it again? But what do you think will be a slightly cheaper item or a more expensive item?
Yeah, that is a very slippery slope that naturally, companies are going to say, oh, we can get away with selling this huge,
if they spend $500, maybe they'll spend $300 or $200.
Maybe we'll make a smaller skiff version of it, and then it'll slowly become little micro machines that they're trying to crowdfund.
Eventually they'll beat it to death. If they have a good thing, they'll beat it to death. Well, what is your story with your crowdfunding?
Well, I used to work for a company called Majesco, which is a video game company. Mm-hmm. Majesco did a lot of games like Cooking Mama, but their biggest game, I think, even to date, is a game called Blood Rain. And she's like this like vampire huntress, sort of character. And so there's never any like official figures for her, even from Majesco. We never licensed anything to manufacture toys for her. So there was this sort of early days crowdfunding site. And so they said that they wanted to sort of get money together to create this like a Blood Rain action figure. Not even action figure, like an actual figure statue.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, cool, that's perfect. I add to the collection, and because I worked there, I figured it would be perfect. I can put it in my case and something I can point to. So.
Is this where I have to start playing sad music in the background?
Yeah. Break out the violin. Well, exactly. The buy-in was a minimum of $50. And if you went higher, you'd get like some of it back, or something to the fact that if they do something later on, you'd get a discount, like they give you like a coupon or a code or something.
Okay.
So I put in $70. So I was like, okay, that's on par with what I'd pay, and I'd get maybe something later on for what they do. A few weeks go by, I don't hear anything from them, so I contact the guy. Are you still producing it? Still what's going on? What's the status on it? So he gets back to me, he's saying, oh yeah, we're still doing it. A month or two goes by, nothing. Until it's like 6 months, I write a very pointed letter saying, okay, what is going on? You guys have had my money for a while now, and we're not getting any sort of weekly or monthly, email keeping up on it. He never messaged me back after that. I never saw the money again. The whole thing completely was a bust. Now, I'm not sure if they just didn't reach their goal and they folded, or if the whole thing was a scam from the beginning.
Oh, but this is the company you were still working for?
No. This had nothing to do with the company. Like the company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The company made the video game, but there was a guy there was like a fan of the character on the side who was trying to put together this
I see.
So unfortunately, never saw my that character. Never made it to me. I don't think it's ever produced.
I have a similar story in a way. And this is, again, back when the early days of eBay, before there was such a thing as PayPal. When eBay, you would have to send somebody a check or a money order.
Yeah.
And I remember once I ordered this Star Trek figure, and I never got it. And I paid with a money order, and that money just went out the window. And I was like, oh, this has finally happened to me. You know, you hear all these horror stories of people not paying. Granted, now it's a lot safer because PayPal, you can just stop the payment and then return it to you and that kind of thing if somebody does any kind of shenanigans. But that was the danger, I remember back then, of any sort of internet thing where you were at the mercy of you had to trust people, and then they could just completely screw you over.
Yeah, but I think PayPal was probably the greatest thing to happen to eBay. Yeah. Those two linked together. It really secured and locked down the buying. I'm sure scams still happen, they still get through, but the PayPal payment method with eBay, having them so closely tied together in the payment process is probably the best thing to happen to online buying, really.
Definitely. Now, the other little aspect I want to mention about toy collecting, and this has to do with customizers, and I've been running into a lot of this, is that a lot of times when fans are just not happy with the product that's being pumped out there, whether the product is inferior in quality or like you said, distribution problems, I've been seeing a lot of people, and again, maybe it's because of the groups I visit, people that customize. They customize their own figures, whatever line you're into that was never manufactured, they just created themselves. They don't mass produce them, in a factory. They just hand make a lot of stuff. And I've been finding a lot of that having to do with Star Wars customized figures, and also with reproduced, or better known as repro, parts that are recreated. And I know that in the whole field of collecting, there's this, you're in one camp or the other. There's one camp that says no reproductions. We don't want anything reproduced, even if it's a sticker or a gun or whatever accessory you're missing, a cape, whatever. And then there's another camp that says, who cares? As long as you're not selling it, pretending that it's something else and ripping somebody off. If you enjoy it, then buy it. Who cares? And I've noticed, again, with the advent of 3D printing, there's a lot of stuff now that could get remade. Whether it's let's say a ship and a part is broken and you cannot find that part, people are making 3D printed parts for all types of accessories, ships, playsets that are just fantastic. And no longer do you have to pay $100 for a part that now you can probably buy for $10, if you're happy with the quality of it.
Yeah, and I have a sort of similar thing with that. And I used to and still sort of dabble and play a game called Warhammer, which is a tabletop miniatures game where you have these little miniatures, like little miniature armies. Basically, then your opponent would have a miniature army, and you guys on each other out on the on the
like
tabletop,
like the little D&D pieces. Like
except like a huge
are they
scale.
plastic or pewter?
So here's the thing: there's some that are plastic and some that are pewter. Most of like the specialty characters who are like guys with like lots of armor and special weapons. Most of those guys are pewter. But more of like your rank and file soldiers are plastic. So with 3D printing, these pieces are insanely expensive. But one unit of like foot soldiers that you would have in your army could easily be like $45 for one box. To put that in perspective, you probably would need, for a good sized army, you probably need 3 or 4 of those boxes. And then as well as like your artillery or cannons or your commander or special units. I have a Bretonian army, which is sort of like knights. Yeah, and the whole thing probably costs upwards of maybe $1,000.
Ouch!
Just the army, yeah.
And are they painted, or do you have to paint them yourself?
No, you have to paint them yourself as well. Then you got to buy the paints.
Then you
have like the paint brushes, the tools.
Down the rabbit hole you go. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the thing is, with 3D printing now, a lot of people are selling or making basically 3D prints of the licensed Warhammer models and selling them. And so, it's sort of like that gray area where, you don't know if, you should buy, the 3D printed version of it for a lot cheaper, or do you want the official, one that you have to buy? So the 3D printing thing, I think, is playing a big hand, and that's going to be a big game changer, I think, later on.
I would defend the 3D printing more for when you're dealing with items that are, 30, 40 years old, where you cannot find replacements. Stuff that is so old that, like I said before, you got to pay $100 for something that normally would have cost you 10 cents. I wouldn't advocate, something that's in the stores right now, taking a scan and then reselling it to somebody else. Now, granted, I mean, if you know it's a copy, in other words, I would say it's worse if you're pretending that this thing is original and it is not. That I cannot, I cannot advocate for that. No way. You're scamming somebody, plain and simple. But if you're saying, this thing that is 30 years old that you can't find anywhere, I can sell you a 3D version of this, this door from this car. If you're okay with it, live with it, and that's fine. But no, there are groups. Oh my God, there are Facebook groups where they're like, if you even say the word reproduction, they just throw you out of the group. They're like so serious about the whole issue of repros that they're just wow. They're just like, they're out there, man. And it's like stickers. Like, where the hell are you going to find 30-year-old stickers? They won't stick anymore. The colors change. These things they die. They don't live that long. So you have to reproduce these stickers that you can't find anywhere.
Right. And well, that's the thing too, where that type of selling and buying that has to live online. Really, I mean, I'm trying to think of it now for like buying new stuff from a retailer or from a toy company like Hasbro, you have, that could feasibly survive, in a store, obviously. But when it comes to like reprints and everything, there's no place you can go to, unless you go to maybe like a flea market, I guess, where people are obviously selling their stuff. But,
yeah, it's private sellers, it's eBay, Facebook. But think about it. If Hasbro wanted, they could reprint stickers. They could be official stickers, but then they get the backlash of the of people that own, because this happens all the time. I read about this all the time. People get all bent out of shape. Like they just announced these Hasbro Kenner vintage figures they're going to release later this year. It's like an anniversary set, if you will, of 6 figures. Luke, Leia, Chewie, Han, and Vader, and a Stormtrooper, I think. And some people are like their life just ended because they're like, this is going to destroy the market. And it's like, no, the card looks different. The back is different. The stamp on the leg doesn't have 77. It has 2019 on it. How is this going to kill you? How are you going to get ripped off? Are you that stupid that you're going to say, ooh, I'm going to pay $600 for that? It's like, no, it's so, it's like, relax.
I think it's also, and I could be completely off base on this, but I feel like it's also like that mentality where they feel like, they have something, special and that only they had access to it. They have this really cool, old figure. And if you resupply it to the masses, now it's not as cool. It's so accessible now.
That's a whole other show, because that is this, the name of that show is The Psychology of Collecting, because I know somebody
that'd be part 2.
Yes. I know somebody that gets upset when people buy stuff online that's 30 years old or 20 years old, because to him, unless you bought it at the time it was being sold and you went to the store and you stood in line and you paid out of your wallet, it doesn't count. So, if you all of a sudden decide you wanted to collect, 1977 action figures, you shouldn't be, you shouldn't do that, because you're not an original collector. You're stealing the thunder from the original collectors. It's like, really? You really have the time?
So that person must really not like online shopping because that goes against his core values of being able to access things.
Oh, please! That person is buying bootleg stuff left and right. That's homemade in somebody's basement. But again, this is another episode.
Yeah. We'll put a pin on this and come back.
I've explained this before. You collect because you want to reinvest. Some people collect just because they're going to resell. Some people collect because they like to have them physically in their vicinity. Like that's the type of collector I am. I want my stuff because I want it here and I want to look at it. I'm not going to collect something and throw it in a closet for the next 30 years that nobody will ever see. Some collectors buy stuff and don't want to show it because sometimes they're like afraid of showing it because they think they're going to get stolen. Some collectors love to tell you about how much this is worth and they never sell it. So it's like, well, this thing is worth $800 now. I could pay for my kids' books in college. Are you going to do that? No, I'm not. Okay, thank you for letting me know how much your collection is worth, and you will never sell it. So again, you can write a book on the psychology of collectors, and man, is there a lot of stuff out there. And that again, that has a lot to do with how you feel about reproductions and that sort of thing. So the people that are concerned that it's hurting the market and the value. And my collection is, I think my collection is worth $10,000. And now they're introducing these figures. My collection now is going to drop to $6,000. It's like, but were you going to sell them? No. Okay, so who cares what it's worth if you're not going to sell?
It's just an ego boosting idea that's in your head. Really, it has no real bearing because you're not going to sell it anyway. So
yeah, I know. But yeah, this whole thing. I mean, again, I have no idea where this is going to go. I mean, are we ever going to see the return? There were some rumblings going around that for Christmas, Walmart is going to have like a display area that's going to be a Toys R Us like express end cap, and it's going to say, and I seen pictures, I forget what stores they had them. They were trying to kind of recycle the Toys R Us brand, and then in some foreign markets they were able to, I forget if it was Canada or something, they were able to keep some of that Toys R Us stuff going, but I don't know. I don't think we're going to see it.
In Canada, Toys R Us still exists. It's still its own standalone company. I mean, not standalone company, but rather they actually still have physical stores that are still there. I think it's just the United States. I think China. I think a few of like the bigger countries where it folded, but there's still a few Toys R Us that are still existing out there. Now, rather that's going to last is a different argument, which is something. I wanted to also bring up is. Could we, if there is a private buyer who buys, the brand of Toys R Us, how feasible is it to try to bring it back and try to have another go at this? Because, at this rate, the way it's, and we're seeing right now with Sears is is closing up. All these big box stores. I think Best Buy is like hanging on to this skin of its teeth. All these stores are closing up. How feasible would it be to try to reinvigorate and reopen now? The brand like Toys R Us, is it just going to be a repeat, 4 years down the road, or are we going to see the same thing happen again?
Well, the problem with the Toys R Us is that it was so huge in terms of, remember, it was Babies R Us, and within Toys R Us, you had like toddler toys and, younger kid toys, you had girl toys, you had boy toys, you had sports. They had so much that, to start from scratch again, that would be pretty much impossible, I think, to generate so much stock and then, duplicate all those stores throughout the country, that many employees. And I don't know, that's just not, I mean, I don't know. Is this cyclical? Are we going to these periods where all of a sudden these box stores will return again? The brick and mortars, they're going to return? Or are we moving on to something? Are we continually just changing to something different? Having to do with the internet. Is internet sales going to just blow everything out of the water? Why couldn't Toys R Us keep their name and become an internet store just like Amazon?
Yeah, that'd be a good point. Yeah, I mean, because we saw it with Radio Shack, where when Radio Shack went under, they switched basically to sort of online retailing. So I'm not sure why Toys R Us had. I know Toys R Us was in debt by a lot.
They had major problems, financial issues internal, that they were like investing or lying about their numbers or something that completely killed them. But that name, just the Toys R Us name alone, I mean, I'm sure it's got to be worth a lot of money. So who knows if that's something they can recycle and turn into something else. Or like we said, is there something completely different down the line that we can't even imagine right now? Can they just market directly to people? Can people just say, all right, Hasbro, here, get me these things. Mattel, I want this. Can they generate enough money from marketing directly to the individuals to make up what they were making from the big stores? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, they carry such a big name. So I wonder if they can do like a lot of like, if they can try to have like some sort of like exclusive deals with like, because I know there are some sort of like for certain brands that they like. I think Walmart has like for Star Wars like Black Series, they have like exclusive figures and things like that. Yeah. So maybe Toys R Us, if they want to, they can have this obviously isn't going to carry them for survival, but if they can have a lot of exclusive figures or exclusive toys.
Well, they had that
for a whole bunch of them.
They had that for a long time. Toys R Us, Kmart, Best Buy, I think even GameStop, Target, Walgreens. all these stores, I remember whenever either Celebration or Toy Fair or Comic-Con would arrive and the Hasbro presentation would happen, and then they would tell you about all these waves that are coming, they would then go down the line and tell you what are the exclusives and where you can find them. But little by little, there was just less and less and less. So all of a sudden, no more Toys R Us. There's no more Walgreens exclusives. There's no more, KB exclusives, that kind of stuff. So I honestly don't even know what's left, from the exclusivity that they used to have. They used to relish that.
Right. And so the only other thing I was thinking of was that maybe they could do something with, because like you mentioned before, that Toys R Us was very wide. Like they had a very broad scope. They had like Babies R Us, they had like toddlers sections and, bicycles and, stuff like that. So would it be possible to have them focus on like a very specific genre or a very specific set, like maybe just action figures or just Legos or something, and pare down so the fact that they can get rid of a lot of the superfluous extras they had, and focus on like a specific type of collector.
But the question is,
brand it like that.
The question is, who's making that decision? In other words, I'm sure everything is motivated by the profit. How much money? What percentage of the profit is the baby products, and what percentage is the young Fisher Price? That kind of young market. What percentage is girl products? What percentage is boy action figure kind of I imagine they would have to hit whatever's their biggest, and they would have to just toss aside the rest. But who the heck knows at this point? But hey, as long as we at least still have the internet, we can still find them. And I'm almost equally now in terms of being able to find stuff, not just eBay. For me, when it came to the internet, eBay was the main thing, and then a little Amazon. I did get a lot of books from Amazon, but I get a lot of books from here. But now, as far as me collecting older Star Wars stuff, which I'm still in the process of getting my old Kenner stuff, I'm almost getting the majority of it now through Facebook groups, private sales, through PayPal. They post it, you agree to the price, and boom, there it is. The majority of my stuff is all coming through private sales.
That's interesting. That's one area where I haven't jumped on board yet. Like I do most of my stuff through eBay and Amazon. But in the Facebook groups you brought up before, and I've yet to actually like dive in and try to search around for anything I'm looking for, because there's a whole bunch of Egomos figures that I'm trying to find, and the DC collection is out of print right now, so the prices are like steadily rising, higher and higher.
Start searching through Facebook, because like I said, depending on what your focus is, Star Wars toys alone, especially, I'm just talking about vintage, because there are so many groups out there that are selling stuff. But this vintage alone, I have at least, I would say, 15 groups that I'm always getting information on, and all of a sudden, ooh, I need that. That's the piece I was missing from that other ship. I'm going to go get that. If you're into Eagle Moss, I'm sure you can find, what ends up happening is you find one group, and within that group, they talk about other groups, and next thing you know, you have 15 groups under your belt. So I would suggest that, because the prices, sometimes I'm getting better prices on these groups than I am. And here's another thing that they do. And again, this is all crazy Facebook stuff. They do these things called flash sales, where they do a live stream video of them just showing you merchandise. And it's like an auction. It's like, okay, this item here, it's a Star Wars X-Wing, $50. And whoever types the message first, I want it, that person gets it. Next item, boom. This is $30. Whoever types the message first gets it. So that's another.
So it's really like a live auction, right?
But you're not bidding. You're just, if you're the first to say you want it, you get. That's it. You're not really bidding again. It's just it's how fast you can say you want it, and obviously you have to pay for it. Obviously, But you're not bidding. You're not competing with anybody. Just the speed of how quickly.
Yeah, well, you're competing on speed, rather.
Exactly, and the price. Obviously, if you agree on that price, boom, there it is. So there's a lot of stuff like that, or there's just people that will post a picture of multiple items and then all the prices. And if you're the first person to send them a private message, and they accept it, boom, it's yours. So, yeah, I would suggest that anybody who's really looking into saving some money, especially when you're looking for older stuff that's maybe a little too expensive in eBay even, there's your chance, there's the opportunity.
Very interesting.
So, this is where we are theorizing. You know, we gave you our entire history of where we started collecting, how the market has changed, and even our collecting habits, how they changed of different sources, and a little snapshot into what might be coming in the future. Who knows? We could be completely wrong. We usually we can never predict anything really. Who knows which way this whole thing's going to go? But as we continue with doing these shows, you never know. Maybe we'll do that psychology of collecting show, and then, boy, are we going to get some feedback on that one. I want to thank Steve, as usual, for joining me. Thank you, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was a great one. It was a fun one.
Thank you for suggesting it. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I'd like to, as usual, thank Steve for joining me. He has a completely different experience to a certain extent of how collecting, started with him and where he was able to find things as opposed to mine. But man, are we in a different world right now. Things are looking so different. We're still kind of able to find things. It was much easier to be able to go into one place and just see everything in front of you, to have such a wide selection of items. But it's a different world. I don't know if that will ever return again. But in the meantime, we do have some options for you guys, and hopefully you'll take advantage of them and just keep navigating this toy collecting world that we are all part of. And we're glad to be able to share our tips and our experiences with you. So, on behalf of everybody here at the show, thanks for listening, and hope to see you soon here at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Where you gonna find that special toy at a price that's really low? Not at the zoo, but here's a thought for you. There's a really great place to go. KB Toy Store. We got the toys and the price you're looking for.
KB has great prices and selection on Atari games and systems, from hot new cartridges to the popular price 2600 and arcade quality 7800.
KB Toy Store. We got the toys and the price you're looking for.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Perone, copyright 2019.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.